Hello everyone, and welcome back to our channel. Today, we re-diving into the extraordinary life of a woman who captured the hearts of millions with her timeless stories, the one and only Louisa May Alcott. You probably know her as the author of Little Women, but her real life was just as compelling, if not more so, than the fictional world she created. So, grab a cup of tea, get comfortable, and let's explore the life of this remarkable author. Louisa May Alcott was born on November 29, 1832, in Germantown, Pennsylvania. It's a fun fact that she actually shared a birthday with her father, Amos Bronson Alcott. She was the second of 4 daughters, and if that sounds familiar, it's because her own family life became the blueprint for the beloved March family. Her sisters were Anna, the eldest, who inspired Meg, Elizabeth, or Lizzie, the gentle soul behind Beth, and May, the artistic youngest, who became the model for Amy. Louisa's father, Bronson, was a man far ahead of his time. He was an educator and a philosopher with some very progressive ideas. He believed that learning should be an enjoyable and interactive experience for children, which was a pretty radical concept back in the 1830s. His educational theories, however, didn't always translate into financial success. The family moved frequently, and financial instability was a constant theme throughout Louisa's childhood. In 1834, the Alcotts moved to Boston, where Bronson established his famous Temple School. This was no ordinary school. He encouraged students to ask questions, think for themselves, and even taught them about art and physical education. While this sounds wonderful to us today, many parents at the time were scandalized. The school eventually failed, plunging the family back into financial hardship. But this move to the Boston area was pivotal for another reason. It placed the Alcotts right at the heart of one of the most important intellectual movements in American history, Transcendentalism. Bronson Alcott was a key figure in this movement, and their home became a gathering place for brilliant minds like Ralph Waldo Emerson, Henry David Thoreau, and Margaret Fuller. Imagine growing up with these literary giants as your family friends. Emerson, in particular, was a dear friend and a huge influence on Louisa. He would lend her books from his personal library and encourage her intellectual curiosity. It was like having the world's greatest thinkers as your personal tutors. This environment shaped Louisa profoundly. The transcendentalist ideals of individualism, self-reliance, and a deep connection to nature are woven throughout her writing. She was taught to value her own thoughts and to question societal norms, which was incredibly empowering for a young woman in the 19th century. Her mother, Abigail, whom they called Abba, was also a powerful force. She was a strong, practical woman who held the family together through their many struggles. She was an early advocate for women's suffrage and social reform, and she instilled in Louisa a fierce sense of justice and independence. One of the most famous and, let's be honest, most bizarre chapters of their lives was the Fruitlands experiment in 1843. Bronson, along with a co-founder, decided to create a utopian society on a farm in Harvard, Massachusetts. The idea was to live a pure, simple life, completely off the grid. They were strict vegans, wore only linen clothing because cotton involved slave labor, and refused to use animal labor for farming. They even bathed in cold water. It was an ambitious, idealistic project, but it was also a complete disaster. The group wasn't prepared for the harsh New England winter, and the experiment collapsed after just 7 months. For young Louisa, it was a time of serious hardship and hunger, an experience she would later satirize in her story, Transcendental Wild Oats. From a very young age, Louisa felt a deep responsibility to help her family financially. She saw her mother working tirelessly and her father's philosophies failing to put food on the table. So, she took on any job she could find. She worked as a teacher, a seamstress, a governess, and even a domestic servant. These experiences, while difficult, gave her a rich understanding of different aspects of life and human nature, which she would later pour into her stories. But her true passion was always writing. She began writing poems and short stories as a teenager, finding an escape and a voice in her imagination. Her early work was often sensational and dramatic, what she called blood and thunder tales, which she published under the pseudonym A.M. Barnard. These were thrilling stories of passion, revenge, and mystery. A far cry from the wholesome family tales she's famous for. It was a way for her to make money quickly, and honestly, she had a lot of fun writing them. Her big break came in an unexpected way. During the Civil War, Louisa served as a nurse in a Union hospital in Washington, D.C. It was grueling, heartbreaking work. She cared for wounded and dying soldiers, witnessing immense suffering firsthand. Unfortunately, she contracted typhoid fever and was treated with mercury, which had devastating long-term effects on her health. But this experience led to her first major literary success. Her letters home were so vivid and compelling that she revised them for publication as hospital sketches. The book was a hit, praised for its humor, honesty, and compassion. It was the first time the public really got to see her unique voice shine through. Then, in 1868, her publisher, Thomas Niles, asked her to write a book for girls. Louisa was initially reluctant. She famously said, "I never liked girls or knew many, except my sisters, but our queer plays and experiences may prove interesting, though I doubt it." Well, she couldn't have been more wrong. Drawing from her own childhood memories, she wrote Little Women. The book was an instant, overwhelming success. Readers fell in love with the March sisters, Meg, Jo, Beth, and Amy, because they felt real. They weren't perfect, idealized characters. They were flawed, funny, and relatable young women trying to find their place in the world. And of course, the heart of the story was Jo March. The fiery, independent, aspiring writer, Jo was Louisa's fictional alter ego, a character who broke conventions and inspired generations of girls to pursue their dreams. Unlike most heroines of the time, Jo wasn't just waiting for a husband. She was ambitious, clumsy, and fiercely protective of her freedom. The public's demand for more was so great that Alcott quickly wrote a second part, which was later combined with the first to form the novel we know today. Little Women finally gave Louisa the financial security she had craved her entire life. She was able to pay off all the family debts and provide a comfortable life for her parents and sisters. But fame came at a price. She was constantly hounded by fans and struggled with the loss of her privacy. She once called herself the woman who wrote Little Women, as if her identity had been consumed by her most famous creation. She continued to write prolifically, producing sequels like Little Men and Jo's Boys, as well as other novels for young readers. But she never stopped writing for adults, and she remained a passionate advocate for social reform, particularly women's suffrage and the abolitionist movement. She was the first woman in Concord, Massachusetts to register to vote in a school committee election. Tragically, Louisa's life was marked by loss and chronic illness, likely due to mercury poisoning from her time as a nurse. Her beloved mother, Abba, died in 1877. Then, her youngest sister, May, the model for Amy, died in Paris after giving birth to a daughter, whom she named Louisa May. Louisa, true to her character, took in her infant niece and raised her as her own. Her own health continued to decline. In 1888, her father, Bronson, was on his deathbed. Louisa, who was also gravely ill, went to see him one last time. He passed away on March 4th. Just 2 days later, on March 6, 1888, Louisa May Alcott also died, at the age of 55. She is buried in Sleepy Hollow Cemetery in Concord, on a hillside now known as Author's Ridge, alongside her friends Emerson, Thoreau, and Nathaniel Hawthorne. Louisa May Alcott's legacy is immense. She wrote over 30 books and collections of stories, but it is Little Women that has endured, translated into countless languages and adapted for stage and screen time and time again. She created characters that feel like family and a story that celebrates the simple joys and complex challenges of growing up. More than that, through her life and her work, she championed independence, resilience, and the courage to forge your own path. She was a true trailblazer, a woman who wrote her own story in every sense of the word. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through the life of Louisa May Alcott. What's your favorite part of Little Women, or which of her other works have you read? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more stories about incredible historical figures. We'll see you in the next one.